Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, we're really unearthing some profound insights into a topic that impacts millions. It's the complex yet, incredibly actionable link between our diet and colorectal cancer. Our mission is to peel back the layers of a truly comprehensive scientific review. We're not just skimming headlines here. We're diving into how scientists meticulously analyze the relationship between what we eat and our risk of developing colorectal cancer. And this isn't just about, like, one or two foods. The research has explored this relationship through at least 21 different analytical perspectives. Get ready to uncover some surprising nuances and hopefully some powerful, actionable insights.
Absolutely. And this exploration couldn't be more crucial. Colorectal cancer, or CRC, it's one of the most common cancers globally. There's this complex interplay of genetics and environment, of course. But what's particularly significant for us today is that diet really stands out as one of the most important modifiable factors.
Hmm.
It's a key area where individual choices can genuinely make a difference.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we think about diet and cancer, it's easy to oversimplify, right? We might just wonder, is broccoli good, or maybe is red meat bad? But this research shows that scientists are looking at much more sophisticated patterns. So what are some of these advanced analytical approaches, and why is it so important for us to understand them to get the full picture?
That's a perfect starting point because you're right. Understanding diet's impact is anything but simple. Researchers use a really diverse set of methods to capture the whole picture. They're moving beyond just single nutrients or foods to look at overall dietary patterns. One primary approach involves what we call a priori diet indexes.
Sorry.
Yeah, think of these as predefined healthy eating scores. They're kind of like a rubric, right, where you get points for adhering to established scientific evidence or nutritional guidelines. For example, a Mediterranean diet score measures how closely someone follows that well-known diet. Other examples include the Healthy Eating Index, the DSH diet, or even adherence to the American Cancer Society's guidelines. And what's really striking here is the consistent finding. A higher score on these healthy eating patterns is repeatedly linked to a reduced colorectal cancer risk. And interestingly, for those already diagnosed, it's associated with improved survival after diagnosis.
Wow.
The takeaway: following a recognized healthy eating plan really does seem to pay dividends for your colon health.
So those a priori indexes are like checking how well someone follows a known recipe for health, sort of. But you mentioned another type, a posteriori. How do those differ? And what have we learned when researchers don't start with a preconceived idea of what's healthy?
Precisely. So in contrast to those predefined a priori indexes, a posteriori diet patterns are data-driven. Instead of starting with what should be healthy, researchers use these clever statistical techniques. Think of them as advanced pattern recognition tools like principal component analysis or cluster analysis. They sift through mountains of actual eating habits from large populations. They essentially let the data tell them what common eating patterns naturally group together without any preconceived notions.
Letting the data speak for itself.
Exactly. And when they apply these methods, two main types consistently emerge. The first is what's often termed the Western type diet. This pattern is, rich in red and processed meats, refined grains, sugary beverages, pretty much what you'd expect. And consistently, this dietary style is strongly linked to an increased CRC risk.
No huge surprise there, maybe.
Not really. But the second pattern, the far more protective one, is often called the healthy or prudent pattern. This is characterized by a high intake of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and fish. And, as you might hope, this pattern is consistently linked to a decreased CRC risk. The key insight here is really how foods are habitually combined, Rather than just individual items, it paints a powerful picture of risk or protection.
It certainly paints a vivid picture of how we actually eat.
Yeah.
But I wonder, is there a risk that by grouping diets into Western or prudent, we might oversimplify, like maybe miss the individual elements doing the most damage or good? And the sources also talk about things like inflammatory and insulinemic potential scores. That sounds like an even deeper dive into how diet affects our bodies biologically.
That's an excellent point about oversimplification, and it leads us directly into these deeper analyses. It absolutely is deeper. These inflammatory and insulinemic potential scores, like the DII, that's the Dietary Inflammatory Index, and the EDP, the empirical dietary insulinemic pattern, they aren't just about identifying good or bad foods. They're sophisticated tools. They calculate a numerical score for your overall diet based on how its components are known to either fuel or calm systemic inflammation, or how they influence your body's insulin response, which is so key for managing blood sugar.
Right. Inflammation and insulin, we hear a lot about those.
We do. And what's truly fascinating here is how a diet with a high pro-inflammatory score, particularly observed in men, actually, has been strongly shown to increase colon cancer risk. Even changes in these scores over time have been found to be relevant.
Changes over time. So consistency matters, but also shifts.
Exactly. So the big insight here isn't just what you eat, but how that food interacts with your body's internal systems, particularly inflammation and insulin pathways, which are, well, deeply implicated in cancer development.
That's a powerful connection between diet and our internal biology. Okay, so if we've drilled down from broad patterns to how diet influences inflammation, what happens when we zoom in even further? Are the devil and the angel in the details? Like different types of fats or those smaller micronutrients we often hear about? What specific good guys and bad guys are emerging when we look at individual components?
You're right, the details absolutely matter. And yes, there are some very consistent good guys and bad guys emerging, though it's still a nuanced picture. Let's start with the one that consistently tops the bad guy list: red and processed meats.
Ah, yes. The usual suspect.
Pretty much. There's strong and consistent evidence linking increased consumption, especially of processed meats, think bacon, sausages, deli meats, to elevated colorectal cancer risk. This finding is almost universal across numerous studies. It makes it a clear area for caution.
Okay, processed meat definitely flagged. What about the good guys?
Well, on the more protective side, we see consistent signals from certain food groups: fish, poultry, and specific dairy products like non-fermented milk. They're generally associated with a reduced risk. And if we connect this back to our healthy, prudent diet pattern, the critical role of fiber and whole grains from vegetables, fruits, and whole cereals, it just cannot be overstated. Think of fiber as the unsung hero, not just for digestion, but actively contributing to a healthy gut environment that can deter cancer.
It feels like we hear about red meat constantly. Is the evidence here truly airtight now, or are there still some lingering debates?
That's a fair question. The evidence for processed meat is particularly strong and consistent. Red meat is also strongly implicated, though maybe slightly less universally than processed.
Okay, and moving from whole foods, what about the real nitty-gritty, like different types of fats, or the smaller micronutrients and supplements? What do we know about their specific roles?
Right, fatty acids. So industrial trans fats, those found in many processed foods, are positively associated with rectal cancer. On the other hand, fish-derived omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, show clear protective signals.
So not all fats are created equal.
Definitely not. The source and type are incredibly important. Interestingly, some saturated fats, SFAs, and monounsaturated fats, MUFAs, the findings are complex. Sometimes they're even negatively associated with colon cancer, which tells us that blanket statements like all fat is bad are just far too simplistic.
Specificity is key there.
Exactly. Industrial trans fats are a concern, while certain omega-3s look beneficial. And as for micronutrients and phytochemicals, well, there's strong evidence supporting the protective role of adequate calcium and magnesium intake.
Okay, calcium and magnesium. Good to know.
Yes. But for folate and vitamin B6, the picture gets more complex. The key insight here: it's not one size fits all. Their effects can depend on sex. Folate, for example, might protect women against rectal cancer specifically.
Interesting. So it's getting personalized.
Very much so. What protects one person or one part of the colon might be different for another. It highlights the limitations of broad supplement advice. Polyphenols and phenolic acids, those beneficial compounds in plants, they show mixed results. Sometimes there are sex or tumor location-specific effects, but these findings often need more robust confirmation before we draw firm conclusions.
So what does this all mean for us as individuals then? It's clear diet is a major player. But this research also dives into how our diet interacts with our individual biology and even affects life after a diagnosis. Can you shed some light on these deeper connections, especially how personalized this picture is becoming?
Yeah, this is where the research gets incredibly sophisticated. It's moving beyond simple correlations to understanding complex biological interplay. We're finding that the impact of dietary factors can vary significantly based on sex and tumor sublocalization, meaning the effects might be different for men versus women, or for a tumor located in the proximal colon compared to the distal colon or the rectum. For example, some dietary effects might be more pronounced in men or have different outcomes depending on where the tumor originates. The big insight here is that personalized advice, based on individual characteristics, is becoming, well, increasingly relevant.
Makes sense.
Then there are gene-diet interactions. This is a fascinating field. It shows how our genetic predispositions, things like variations or polymorphisms in genes, genes that act like switches, influencing how our body handles inflammation or insulin processing or fat metabolism, genes with names like TLR4, IL-10, PPRO, or FTO. These variations can actually change how diet affects our colorectal cancer risk.
So our genes influence how we react to food.
Kind of like how a car's performance isn't just about fuel, but also the engine's unique design, right? Our genes are like that engine. They influence how effectively our body uses or reacts to different dietary fuels. Researchers are even looking into how diet interacts with specific tumor mutations, like Correa. Correa is a particular genetic error found in some cancers. It just shows how deeply personalized the future of this research could become.
That's a huge shift from general advice, really highlighting our individual differences. And it sounds like diet isn't just about preventing cancer, but also what happens after a diagnosis. Does this mean dietary changes could be a key part of treatment and recovery, too?
Precisely. Crucially, diet doesn't just influence your risk of getting CRC, it also impacts the prognosis after diagnosis. The evidence is quite clear on this. For those who've had CRC, diets heavy in processed meats are linked to worse disease-free and overall survival.
That's significant.
It is. Conversely, adhering to healthy dietary guidelines, consuming fish, getting adequate omega-3s, these are consistently associated with a better prognosis and improved quality of life for survivors. This makes diet a powerful, accessible tool, not just in prevention, but in ongoing care and recovery.
Wow.
And just to show the sheer breadth of this research, scientists are exploring many other unique angles too. This includes how plant-based diet indexes or even specific cooking methods might impact risk. They're looking at the combined effects of multiple lifestyle factors like obesity and physical activity because our health isn't just about food,
Let's
right?
test the whole package.
Exactly. And even the fascinating emerging role of the oral microbiome, the bacteria in our mouths in CRC. It's truly a holistic approach that connects the dots across our entire lifestyle.
This has been an incredibly thorough exploration of a really complex area. If we were to distill all these different analytical approaches, all these findings from specific foods to genetic interactions, what's the clearest, most actionable picture that emerges for us as listeners? What's the main takeaway, the blinkest insight, if you will?
Blinkist insight. Okay. Well, the clearest picture that emerges consistently across all these scientific perspectives is what we can call the protective diet profile. This is a diet rich in high fiber, abundant vegetables and fruits, whole grains, lean white meats like fish and poultry, unsaturated fats, think good quality olive oil, and adequate calcium and magnesium intake. This pattern consistently aligns with what's known as the Mediterranean diet, the Prudent pattern, or healthy plant-based diets. And fundamentally, it's a diet with a low inflammatory potential.
Low inflammation, key theme.
Definitely. The powerful takeaway: eating this way seems to be your body's best defense. Conversely, the risk-increasing diet profile is equally clear and consistent. This is the Western-type diet we talked about, high in red and processed meats, refined grains, saturated in industrial trans fats, and added sugars. This diet is consistently linked to increased CRC risk and is characterized by its pro-inflammatory and hyperinsulinemic potential. This pattern, unfortunately familiar to many, is a significant contributor to risk.
So the contrast is pretty stark.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's vital to underscore that these dietary principles hold true not only for primary prevention, that is, preventing CRC in the first place, but also for improving prognosis and quality of life after a CRC diagnosis. The overwhelming and consistent evidence across so many different scientific perspectives points to a clear message. Food is medicine, and food is prevention, which, raises an important question for you, our listener. Given what we've discussed, what small, actionable change could you make, maybe starting today, to shift your dietary pattern towards one that supports long-term health and reduces your risk?
That is an incredible synthesis. It offers real clarity in what can feel like an overwhelming field of information. Thank you for guiding us through this truly enlightening analysis of diet and colorectal cancer. It's powerful to see how our everyday choices are so intricately linked to such significant health outcomes.
Absolutely. And the research we've discussed today, it doesn't just present data, it really paints a compelling picture of personal agency, doesn't it? Consider how deeply intertwined our daily food choices are with our future health, and how even small, consistent dietary adjustments can contribute to a profound impact on one of the most common cancers. So the final thought for you is, what will you choose to explore further about your own diet after this exploration? Perhaps starting with just one small intentional shift.